Okay, everyone, we are right at the start of the hour. You can see here again, we have four this month, very unique speakers. By chance, we actually have two Karens today. So our first speaker is going to be Karen Crowley, and she's going to speak to us about farm first and less stress. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that Karen can get right to it this morning.
Okay, so we tested this before I came on and it all worked perfectly, but hang on 1 second and I'm going to make it work perfectly again.
I think by now we're all very used to Zoom.
A couple of you absolutely saw that came up.
Oh, I did.
No hesitation whatsoever. All right, here we go. Close, really close. You're all watching me blip all over the place now, aren't you? Because I didn't stop.
That's quite all right. You're not the first, and
me blip.
most likely will not be the last.
This is probably true. But I believe that I'm now sharing a PowerPoint with you all.
Okay. Yes, and it looks wonderful.
Thank you. So as Carrie said, my name is Karen Crowley, and I am the program manager of a program called Farm First in Vermont. We are a small but mighty program with a small and mighty team. And I'm going to give you some information about Farm First, what we do and how we do it, and then a little bit about how we've been expanding since we all got our Farsan state grants. So less stress, more farming. We are, for all intents and purposes, an employee assistance program for farmers and their families. We model ourselves after that, knowing that for businesses who use an employee assistance program, they do that because they recognize that if their employees have access to some support around stress, whether it's work or home or whatever their issues might be, they're able to be happier, more productive employees. So in Vermont, the state government has an employee assistance program. And that prompted the Agency of Agriculture to say, hey, we actually need one of these for our farmers and not just for ourselves as a staff. So that started way back in 2009, jointly sponsored both by InvestEAP Centers for Wellbeing and the Vermont Agency for Agriculture, Food, and Markets. So we work technically within InvestEAP, which is part of state government, and is also partnered with a nonprofit. So we have a couple of different funding streams and supports going in different directions, but primarily we're public, we're not for profit, and we are working very closely with both of those programs or agencies. Primarily what we're providing is mental health support. We are able to use the counselors that are there for all of the EAP assistance in Vermont. And so those are our counselors at Farm First, as well as for the rest of the EAP. They're all licensed and they do have some background, interest, passion around farming. They've gotten some special training. In addition to the licensed counselors, we also have, we call them our resource coordinator. And that's the person who does the initial intakes. He picks up the phone when it rings and helps people begin to sort out what's going on, what are they looking for. So he may just be providing some connections to other resources. For instance, like ag mediation. He may say, okay, so it sounds like ag mediation might be helpful. I'm going to call Matt and connect the two of you so that you can talk to him specifically. And then we kind of hang on to people at that point and act as that central hub to continue to make sure everything's on track. They're connecting with who they need to be connecting with. And again, that may include a counselor, it may not. And we are definitely doing things video conferencing now, but historically we've spent a lot of time on the farm, and I truly hope that we return to doing more of that. So we are just for Vermont. Our services are free. Initially, when we rolled things out in 2009, it was in response to a precipitous drop in the milk market prices, and that we were opened in order to serve dairy farmers. That's no longer the case. We serve Vermont farmers and their families regardless of what type of farming they're doing. And this provides you with some email information, and our website. Our website has got lots more information about us. So as I said, we are small and mighty. We have our pool of counselors, and we have our resource coordinator and myself managing the program. More recently, as we have moved in this past year to the Vermont Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, which we're just calling FARSAN Vermont, these are the things that we put into our proposal and have been focused on. What happened with our state is that the Agency of Agriculture, like in all states, accepted the award. They are the grantee, but we are subcontracting, and most of the actual on-the-ground work is being done by our staff. So we've got all of these things up and running, been able to add to our clinical staff, doing some expansion into the farm worker community, which has not historically been something we've been able to do, done some marketing. And then the other two things that have been particularly interesting, we've done a lot of agricultural service provider training. We were able to train all of the employees at the Agency of Agriculture in basic, how do you recognize when somebody that you're talking with is not doing so well? They're under a lot of stress. You may be concerned about them in any way, shape, or form. How do you recognize that? How do you respond to that? How do you get that person where they need to be? And we're expanding from the employees to the rest of the service providers in the state of Vermont that are interested. And we just recently got a contract from Massachusetts Department of Agriculture, who is also doing some training of ag service providers in their grant, and they've contracted with us to do that. So our ag service provider training is developed and starting to spread. We have a wonderful training coordinator that we were able to add to our staff, and she and I have done a lot of design and development and gotten feedback, and we're pretty happy with where we're going there. The other thing that's been very exciting is the Farmer Peer Network. And that is that rather than sometimes states have been setting up networks where people have an opportunity to go and be a peer group. You can talk to each other. You're all in this together. But we're doing something a little bit differently in that we are training farmers who are interested in being trained and supported to act as peer mentors, for lack of a better word. So it's not as intensive as working with a licensed counselor, but it is somebody that you can connect with who understands what you're going through, and don't have to explain every little thing, and that you have access to without any cost for anything. And we are training and starting to spread those people around the state. They're going to absolutely be clear about what the resources are that are available, so they can be that sort of a conduit. But more importantly, they've been doing lots of training and offering non-judgmental, active listening, what we've been calling compassionate communication, so that they can be there for others around the state. Our next step after we finish all of this training, which will be January, February, we'll be rolling out that network, and those peers will become available to people across the state. So that's our next step, and we're working on an online platform where people will be able to, use a CIS map and say, hey, who's in my area? And they'll be able to connect directly with peers who perhaps can be helpful. So the details of exactly how that's going to work are ahead of us. But this has been something people have gotten super excited about. We definitely have lots of people who want to be trained as peers, which doesn't surprise us, but surprises a lot of people. We heard a lot of, well, that's never going to work. Farmers don't have time to do that. Farmers aren't going to, but they want to do it. They want to give back to community and make life a little easier for others. So that's been really exciting. And we do have other states now that are interested in our peer support training. So we're getting some attention, and hopefully continuing to expand. So that's my spiel. I will stop sharing, short and sweet, but it's a good high-level overview. If you're interested in more information, the website will provide quite a bit, and you can also contact me using contact information that's on that sheet.
Karen, can you go ahead in the chat, share the website and your email? We're
Yep.
going to go ahead and send out your email afterwards as well. But since everybody is right here in focus, they can just copy it.
Absolutely fine.
And if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and unmute and go ahead and ask Karen anything that you would like.
Any.
I think it's Lynette who is talking. It's nothing but static.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Hi.
We can hear your voice now.
You can?
Yes.
Is there still static?
There is,
No.
but we can hear you now.
I'm not sure why. Let me see.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yep, whatever you did worked.
Okay, great. So I have a question, Karen. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing in the agriculture community. Do you have any experience with the Anabaptist population?
No.
Mennonite, Amish?
No. We recently, in a little corner of our state, have had an influx of Amish farmers, and it's the first time that there have been a community here. So brand new, but no, we have not ever in the past done.
And Carrie, this may be something that AgriSafe may want to consider. Is I really think there needs to be more resources for plain folk like us, that's how we're referred to in the Anabaptist community. If there were additional resources on the website for us, I just want to explain to everybody what we're dealing with currently. I chair the Center County Child Death Review Team, and it's not a very pleasurable team to be on, but we do produce really good results. We review fatalities in Center County from 0 to 21, and we look at that death to say, what can we do to prevent it from happening? And recently, on September 24th, there was a tragic accident in an Anabaptist community. It was an Amish community where a 47-year-old father and his two sons, 19 and 14, became trapped in a silo. And it was one of those things where one went in after the other to try to rescue them. And all three of them tragically died because of asphyxiation due to the gases in the silo. And what's really tragic, beyond tragic in this case, is they lost three of their family members 6 months prior, on March 29th. At the same farm, their son, who was 16, he was trapped under a manure spreader and was also tragically killed. Yes. So I am struggling as being on the Center County Child Death Review team. We need to make recommendations to the American Academy of Pediatrics on how we can prevent this from happening in another, with anybody else. And what I'm struggling with is it's really difficult to find resources in dealing with the Anabaptist population, because as you know, or may not know, the Anabaptist community is very sacred with everything that they do. We are considered outsiders looking into their very private world, and they believe that God is, and that's fine. I respect their religious beliefs, but I want to provide education to them in a non-threatening way that they can, understand what we're doing, because my heart just goes out to this.
Oh my gosh,
woman.
yes.
She's lost, not only did she lose 3 sons within a 6 months time frame, she also lost her husband. So our child death review team, we are going to be, this just happened September 24th. So it's still very raw.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to try to give her some time before we approach them. But I really would love to find material on how to, I've been reading a lot of evidence-based research on their ways. I am a certified family nurse practitioner, so I do have some background in that. However, this is a whole new ballgame dealing with the Anabaptist community. So anybody that has any resources or that would love to share, we would greatly appreciate it, because our office, the Pennsylvania Office of Rural Health, we do have a very robust agricultural community. And we are very fortunate on our team. We have a woman who goes out and she does a lot of education with the Worker Protection Safety Program with pesticides and stuff like that. But, we're fortunate that way. But I want to get more resources out there so that we can prevent this from happening again. This is just, I was so sick.
Put your email in the chat, and then I'll pass it on to our AgriSafe crew. But anybody else who is on here, if you do have some resources for Lynette, maybe go ahead and email or private chat.
Okay, I just put it in there.
Yeah, we'll get some resources to you.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to ask. And Karen, thank you for sharing, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you, everybody, for the work that you're doing. So
thank you for the work that you're doing. I've served on a child fatality review board in the past, and so I know, no, it's not fun, but super important work. So
it is. I've been doing it for 20 years, and I keep saying every year, I got to quit doing this, but I can't. I can't walk away from it.
Does anybody else have any questions for Karen?
Chad has his hand raised.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Karen. And I really appreciate the EAP style format that y'all are taking. That makes a lot of sense. I'd love to see something like that across the nation eventually. My question was, you had a little bit in your slide and you kind of mentioned it about maybe use in the past being able to do home visits or farm visits, site visits. Could you say a little bit more about what that structure looked like?
Sure. So in the years prior to the pandemic, most of the time, rather than have a phone conversation or a virtual video call with someone, our resource coordinator was going out to the farm and chatting there. So, it might look a little bit different depending on who the farmer is and what it is they're looking for. But most of the time, it turns out to be kicking around the barn together and talking about what's working well and what's not, or sitting at the kitchen table together. Our counselors also have done home visits in the past, and they usually also have an office that people could travel to. So right now it's kind of a mix. And that seems to be working well for most people. Some people are really ready to be back in person, and some people are not. But yeah, we're just there. We're there. They know we're coming, and we talk just the same way that we would if we were on the phone with somebody. What's up? How can we help?
Well, thank you. That option for availability of being able to go out to someone's operation, that's huge. And it's kind of rare across the country. So kudos to you.
Yeah, it is rare and definitely something people really appreciate. I mean, you have so much more of a connection if you're there with someone and they're, really showing you. Yeah, we like it a lot. I see more hands. Is it Clinton?
Yeah, hi, Karen. Really excited about the work that you're doing up there. We're in Colorado, and I'm the program director for AgWell, and we've been exploring the peer network idea as well. Really excited. I've kind of followed you guys' posting on your website for a while, and curious, what kind of outreach did you do to get the farmers that you're training engaged? Like, how did you reach out? Did you go to specific ones, or did you do, broad posts, or what?
Well, we had plan A and plan B, and plan A was that we were doing community events regionally across the state. And we were using some of our funding to host farmers in the community to get together, talk with one another, have a meal, a little education or guest speaker on something, and introduce the peer network that way. We were not able to do community events that way. So we ended up doing a virtual community event that we tried to make as much like it would have been had people been with one another. And we put it out there. We put it out there in all of the ways that we put out information, come and hear more about this. So that community event then allowed people to follow up with us individually and talk to other people. And so people started coming and saying, okay, so can I sign up? How is this going to work? And from there, it just has continued. We're doing another community event on October 20th. Actually, if you do go to our website, you can register and go to the community event so you can hear us introducing this in the state of Vermont. But yeah, we've had lots of people interested.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do the community event in person because of COVID? Okay. Yep. And the training that you're doing, is it a multi-workshop or multi-day or time training, or is it a one block of time?
No, it is a multi process. Why don't I send you more specific information? We're doing 6 sessions. They're 2 hours each, but there's this gap in the middle because of the farm season. And so it feels a little confusing to say, but yes, it is a series of trainings.
Excellent. I'll reach out to you with the email that you provided. I look forward to talking more. Thanks a lot for what you shared.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. All right, Miss Tara has her hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to let everybody know, I put a link in the chat and it is a behavioral health playing communities resource that we curated whenever we put the AgriStress helpline in Pennsylvania to try to provide some community appropriate referrals if an individual from those communities were to call the AgriStress helpline. I don't know if that helps what you need, Lynette, but when you were talking, I thought, oh, wait, let me find that link and put it in there. So there you go.
Awesome. All right. You guys are fantastic this morning.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. They might actually have some additional resources other than the services they provide that are specifically directed toward the plain communities. So.
All
right. Well, thank you all for your kind attention, and feel free to reach out anytime. We'll just keep chatting.
Thank you, Miss Karen, so much. Yes, and if anybody really wants that information, go ahead and email Karen so that she can send that to you directly. All right, we have something brand new. We have never talked about commercial fisheries before. So today we have 2 ladies, Mandy and Monique, who are going to talk about stress in commercial fisheries. So I will let, I think Mandy, or no, Monique.
I'll go for it. Yeah, I've got the slide, so can I start sharing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Look good?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Monique Coombs. I'm the Director of Community Programs for the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. Our mission is to restore the fisheries in the Gulf of Maine and sustain Maine's fishing communities for future generations. So we work with fishermen all along the coast of Maine in all of Maine's fisheries. So of course, lobster, also groundfish, which includes species like pollock, hake, cod, halibut, monkfish. I work on programs around working waterfront, seafood, and of course, why we're here today, the Fisherman Wellness Program that I helped to build starting around COVID. So I just wanted to introduce myself quickly. Mandy's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to get into a little bit of our work. The one other thing I just want to add quickly is I am also a fishing family. My husband's a fisherman. I have 2 kids. My daughter is 17, and she almost has her lobster license. And then my son is 13, and he has his student license. So Mandy, if you want to introduce yourself quickly, and then we can get into the slides.
Sure. So I'm Mandy. I'm a researcher at the Northeast Center for Occupational Health and Safety. So we work in ag, fishing, and forestry. So of course, today we're focusing on fishing for what we're doing. So our main goal is to reduce risk and improve health in these 3 industries. So we work to understand both the health challenges and the safety challenges within these 3 industries, and then work to identify actionable solutions, things that are easily adoptable, things that are not going to hinder work, things that can be sustainable, cost effective, things like that. And our big thing is we work with workers to design any sort of intervention that we do. We keep them at the forefront of our research. Can't do it without them. And they help us kind of figure out what will work for them, what they see as feasible. And yeah, so let's hop into what we're working on.
Okay, let me get to the next slide, which it does not want. Oh, there it goes. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Okay, so I thought one of the first things to just go over really quickly was what we mean when we're talking about commercial fishing. It's an incredibly complex industry that like I mentioned, has a lot of different species. It's managed by the National Marine Fisheries Service, which is also informally known as NOAA Fisheries. So NMFS is under NOAA. When we talk about commercial fishing in the United States, we're talking about fishermen that are catching fish in the ocean and then bringing it to shore, which is called landing, and selling it. So they're making their living from doing that. I want to also address the connotation that happens around commercial fishing sometimes, is that it's these huge, ginormous boats with massive nets and just sweeping up the bottom of the ocean. In the United States, our fisheries are highly regulated. Some might even say to the point of being burdensome on small businesses. And they are often run by families like mine. The Maine lobster industry, for example, is an owner-operator fishery, which means the person behind the wheel of the boat is also the person that owns the permit, and they have to be there in order to be fishing for lobster. And that's the case for most fishing businesses in the United States. I'm often rather jealous of the agricultural world, to be honest with you. I think the programs and resources that exist for farmers is, something that, in my opinion, is a goal for commercial fishing. The USDA, that you guys are all familiar with, both regulates agriculture and advocates for farmers, whereas the National Marine Fisheries Service is only charged with managing marine resources. So the advocacy that happens at the federal level for fishermen businesses, that happens for agriculture, just doesn't exist. So it's really important that organizations like Northeast Center and the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association and others speak up for fishermen around their mental health and well-being within the industry. It's also one of the most dangerous civilian occupations in the United States. The Northeast groundfish industry, I think a few years ago, was the most dangerous civilian occupation in the United States, which will bring us to our next slide that Mandy will go talk about a little bit in regards to safety.
Yeah, so we just wanted to talk about our life jackets for lobstermen project. This does tie back into mental health, so bear with me for a minute. So commercial fishing, whatever fishery you're in, commercial fishing is a dangerous industry for sure. Falls overboard are a huge problem. Between 2000 and 2016, 204 commercial fishermen died in the US from falls overboard. 108 of them were not found. Of those that were found, not one of them had a life jacket on. So a lot of people kind of look at that simply and they're like, well, duh, just wear a life jacket. This is pretty simple. It's not. So we were working with lobstermen because it's not, I don't want a life jacket. You know, I think I can swim in a cold ocean. That's not the mentality. A lot of life jackets are big, they're cumbersome, they've got a lot of hanging straps. So there are a lot of problems. It hinders their work. And also, especially with straps hanging and things like that, they can get caught up in gear and end up actually pulling them overboard. So of course you don't want that to happen. So we started this project. Julie Sorensen, our director, it was the PI on this project. So it started with talking to 550 lobstermen, just, you know, why don't you wear a life jacket? What is it that hinders your work? What is it that you hate about them? What would it take to get you to wear one? You know, what do you want to see? So we got a lot of feedback. We did a lot of phone interviews, a lot of in-person interviews, and some mail-in surveys. So we then did a trial based on the feedback from these guys. You know, it wasn't, you know, I hate life jackets. It was just, I can't have straps. I can't have bulky. I can't have in the way. I can't have it hinder my work. So we found a few models that we wanted to try out. So we got 181 guys to trial them for a month to let us know, you know, I can work in this. I actually kind of like this one. This is what I don't like about this one. So we got the feedback. The most important thing that really stuck out is that choice was really important to them. You know, every body shape is different. So what's comfortable for one may not be comfortable for another. So we landed on 11 different life jacket models. And we actually went for 8 months. We went port to port along the coasts of both Massachusetts and Maine. And we delivered these at a 50% discount to lobstermen. So we set up right on the docks. So we brought them right to them. They could, our whole thing was try before you buy. So they could try them on, kind of see what they liked, what they didn't like, and pick one that worked for them, and picked one that they were going to wear. So happy news, actually, when this ended, the estimate for wear rates for PFDs was about 10% before we started this project. And we actually talked to the Coast Guard last week or 2 weeks ago, and they said of the vessels that they're boarding, they're now noting how many life jackets are being worn, and the wear rate is now at 35%. So it went up from 10% to 35%, which is really, really awesome. So when we did the interview portion, just to see, you know, why aren't you wearing life jackets? What do you like? And then also in the delivery portion where we brought the life jackets port to port, we got to talk to a lot of lobstermen, and it's a dangerous profession. So pretty much every single person knows somebody that's gone overboard. A lot of people, unfortunately, know someone that's never come home. A lot of them have gone overboard themselves. So kind of in talking to them, we kind of realized that there is another unaddressed problem, you know, mental health and stress. You know, they're under a lot of stress because of regulation, because of all of the pressures that are put on them. And also trauma is a big thing. And I think, you know, the mentality is sort of, it's par for the course. You know, it's a dangerous profession. So they sort of just kind of accept it. And there are, you know, fishermen don't work a typical Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So a lot of mental health resources, if you want to see a therapist or some sort of professional, you can't book that appointment 3 months in advance. If it's a good day, you're going to go fishing. You're not going to go to that appointment. So this really made us realize, and like Monique said, you know, we don't have at the federal level someone advocating for fishermen, someone advocating for their mental health and well-being. So we realized this was a big gap, and we started working with Monique, and we're hoping to address that. So Monique's going to talk about another project.
Me again. So I've always been interested in health and wellness, and tried to build a program through Maine Coast Fishermen's Association for a number of years, but had a bit of a tough time doing it. It was just still somewhat novel, but during COVID, there was a little bit more funding available for mental health and rapid response grants. And so the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association got a few $1,000s from a foundation to start to work on mental health stuff for commercial fishermen. And initially we thought maybe we would make a brochure, but then we realized that wasn't super practical for what fishermen needed. And so we worked with our partners at NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental, oh gosh, I am blanking on the acronym. So NAMI, and a couple others, Access Health and Midcoast Health, to get a list of counselors that sort of understood the precarious nature of a fisherman's schedule, that had availability, that were doing telehealth. And what we ended up doing was just paying the bills for fishermen to seek therapy if they wanted to during COVID. And from there, we continued to build the program by doing things like NAMI Maine wrote monthly blog posts for us on things like grief, trauma, even things like hydration and wellness and physical health. And then we started about a year ago, I did a cultural competency course with some partners. So teaching counselors about commercial fishing, the nature of the work, the usual stresses that happen for commercial fishing. And we've been able to build our counselor list from there. I think probably like a lot of places right now, though, our counselor list is struggling. We need more counselors in the state of Maine. And then this is sort of where we started to get tied in with Northeast Center, and we worked on the Fishing Forward podcast with them and some other partners. I highly recommend listening to it. My favorite episode is episode 11, which is about stress, anxiety, and moral injury, which is a term I had never heard before. And this podcast as well covered topics like hydration, nutrition, and sleep deprivation, and really tried to meet fishermen where they were at. I think fishermen and farmers probably have a lot of similarities here. The answer to sleep is not just sleep more, but really talking with fishermen about, the seasonality of their schedules, taking naps, using caffeine appropriately, and things like that. So it's very practical in the way that fishermen are practical. And it was a great podcast to work on with Northeast Center. And like I said, I highly recommend it. MCFA has also done a little bit of work. So somebody mentioned agribility, I think, in the chat. So we are working on fishability with our agribility program here in the state of Maine. We're offering monthly stretches for commercial fishermen. It's on the Maine agribility website under fishability. And we're pairing them with a work task. So we're showing fishermen, here's what you might be doing in your day that's causing some tension in your shoulders, neck, back. And here's a stretch break that you can do to help counter that. Because of doing some of this work, I'm also a NASM certified personal trainer now. So we're looking into doing some strength programming for commercial fishermen as well. So really pairing mental health work as well as physical health work. I also want to mention quickly that Mandy and I are doing a webinar with AgriSafe on October 25 as well. So we'll be able to get into some of the details of some of the stuff we're just going through quickly today. And then the most recent thing Northeast Center and Maine Coast Fishermen's Association are working on together is doing some directed outreach to fishermen around mental health and wellness. I also want to say here, commercial fishing is traditionally a male, mostly men work within the industry. Women are becoming more involved. As I mentioned, my daughter's fishing. I know quite a few women who fish. NAMI introduced Maine Coast Fishermen's Association to man therapy. And I just thought that this organization and the work was great. They do a lot of work targeted at male-dominated industry, so construction, first responders, and we're really excited to be working with Northeast Center to do some of this targeted directly at commercial fishermen. So flat ass calm is terminology used by a lot of fishermen to talk about a day that's not windy. When the ocean is flat, they'll call it flat ass calm. And so we're working with Man Therapy on framing some outreach material right at commercial fishermen to really start to break down some of the stigma and build some awareness. So Amanda, I don't know if you want to add anything about Man Therapy.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think a big thing too is just creating resources that are relatable. What Maine Coast Fishermen's Association has done in doing the cultural competency training is great. But like Monique said, like there are still more providers that are needed. So it's really important when seeking therapy to have a professional that is relatable to you, that kind of understands what you're going through. And Karen, I mean, I think you talked about that a lot with the farmers as well. So I think this kind of gives them something that makes, you know, mental health resources relatable to them. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, perfect. And I want to add to something Karen mentioned, which was the peer-to-peer at some point, I think is something that we're really interested in as well. We've worked with NAMI to do mental health first aid training for some of my colleagues, and I've taken it myself. And we really wanted to build that out more. So like I said, we hope, you know, maybe people can participate in the October 25 webinar as well, where we can get into a little bit more detail about this. If anybody has any follow-up questions, our information is on this slide. And, you know, information about this or just commercial fishing in general, I'm always happy to chat. It is an incredibly complex industry. And, you know, so any questions are welcome.
Yeah, as I'm sitting here listening, I live in Missouri, so I have zero knowledge of fisheries. So I was just like writing down a bunch of stuff that I can now forward on to everybody else. All right, anybody have any questions for Mandy or Monique? Just go ahead and unmute. In the chat, Chad said, great work, ladies, addressing the needs of an important, unique, and underserved population. Definitely underserved.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Mandy put the podcast link in the chat for anybody who wants to go listen to that. And then ladies, I know you had your contact information on the slides, but if you could each put that in the chat as well, in case anybody wants to contact you directly. All right, so if we don't have any questions for the ladies, we're going to go to our second Karen. Karen Eddington is going to talk to us about strong under pressure and skills to ride the wave. So Karen, I'll let you go ahead and start sharing your screen and you can take it away.
All right, I'll share my screen here in just a moment. I've loved learning from all of you guys today. I really appreciate it. And if we were to continue with the message that I've heard is that of like relatability in our work. So I'm a conference speaker. That's how I connect in agriculture. I speak from, I've been from East to West Coast, working with either leadership groups or right direct. And the goal is to try and get it to be relatable through story. I'm a researcher, but I've learned that the data doesn't reach people as much as stories do. So I'm going to start with this one, 2 hours north of my house. So in the fall of 2019, a deep freeze hit Idaho. And it was one of those freezes where you know your crops are on the line. It made it so that everyone started harvesting early. They found out one farm, an entire community found out that one farm wasn't going to get their potato crop in time. And so after everyone had been up since midnight, trying to get their own crops in time, like they stopped everything and went to go see this farm and went to help them. 50 people showed up. There were 9 harvesters, and one farmer in particular took a video of this, and this video went viral. I'm going to share it with you in just a minute, but he titled it, "Meanwhile in Idaho." And what was interesting about this to me is it was a couple months later that I was talking to some people at the end of a conference. So it's those hallway conversations. And someone said, well, I was there. It came up because it was in the media lately. And they said, yeah, they owned a cow and calf operation. I mean, they weren't even in potatoes. And they said, we dropped everything to jump in and help. And they watched the community do that. And they said, what's really interesting, though, is what we do doesn't always make the news. And so where you live, it's your meanwhile in Maine, meanwhile in Colorado, in Pennsylvania, good people are coming together to support each other in communities, and they come together. So I'm going to start sharing the screen, and I'm going to show you just a clip of this. And you'll be able to see the picture starting off, but this was Idaho right before it hit 19 degrees and they were able to save an entire farmer's crop. Are you guys able to see that okay? This is the video. I'm going to share it for just a minute. And what you hear in it, all you hear is this blinker. You see all of these people coming together. They're all turning in to help this one farmer. So many times when we talk about stress in agriculture, sometimes we don't talk about the communities that come together because of it too. And things like this are happening in our communities every day, and we want to support each other and come together and rally and help each other through this. This inspires me deeply to see people come together. So as this video wraps up, I'm going to just go to the next kind of screen here. This is where I live. I live in Nibley, Utah. It is an agriculture community. Utah State Aggies, they're kind of in our community here, but this is where I'm from. I care about this work because it's community. It's my community. It's people. My work is all based around the Under Pressure Project, where we help people develop self-stability skills. And I do this by teaching at conferences and connecting with other ag groups. But pressure is when something you care about is at risk. And pressure, it's when those deadlines, demands, needs, and expectations, they press at our capacity. And so what we're trying to do is give people some self skills. And I call it riding the wave, because a lot of times in agriculture, there are highs and there are lows, and there are a whole different array of waves that we can look at. But I'm going to pull one up right here. This is what I call a disaster wave. So it's really interesting to consider, like, what happens when a disaster occurs. And I know we talked about loss. Lynette, your comment on loss, like that hits you right in the heart, and you wonder like what you can do to help. And I know this is maybe just a piece of like data or thoughts on it, but sometimes we want to give people tools and thoughts of what's happening when people go through natural disasters. I know the hurricanes have just been on the news, but it's more than that. In our farm communities, we know how much that things out of our control can happen that can impact people. So I just want you to see what this disaster wave looks like. A lot of times when there's a threat, we kind of start right here. You can kind of see it level up, but it goes up just a little bit before the impact. And when an impact or something bad happens, we can tend to dip. And this isn't how we feel and how we're experiencing life. What's really interesting is that it can go back up right after the impact, because we've got our adrenaline, we've got the heroic effort. A lot of times when there's loss, this is when a community rallies together and something good happens. But a lot of times we don't talk about what happens next. And this is kind of the interesting part, is right after that heroic effort, we have like a recovery and an aftermath to deal with. And this is where it can dip. And it can continue to maybe go up and down. A lot of times there are, people use the word triggers, but there's fight, flight, and freeze things that happen. There's some forms of PTSD, and we want to make this more relatable. And so as people are going through these things, we learn that our stories help each other through this. But still to kind of stick with some of these technical terms, it helps me to understand a little bit more about anxiety and depression through these things. A lot of times through my work and research, I've learned in agriculture, anxiety tends to happen first with farmers because we're in a state of alarm. It's that protective state we're anticipating, because we know like that we can't control commodity prices. We can't control the weather. We can't control when that deep freeze is going to hit. And so we're heightened, and that anxiety can come first. But what's interesting about depression, a lot of people mistake depression with just sadness, but really it's brain health. This is brain functions here. It's often closer to like feeling empty or not being able to feel at all. Sometimes with that fight, flight, and freeze, recognizing how this impacts our brain health. So those are just a couple of things to consider. I'm going to pull off a stop share and show you something else too. As part of my work, I collect questions, people's questions. So I have a pile of note cards here. These ones came from, I believe these ones are from Montana. I visited, and they came from the leaders. I heard you asking questions about like getting peer support group. As I visit other ag communities, one of the things I noticed was one community had leaders apply to be in their leadership program. So the association just invited people to be part of like a higher, just invited them to have more networking opportunities, to have connection, to be leaders. And I was amazed at how many people did this. And these leaders were the ones that were asking questions. And these are what we want to be having discussions based around. So this one is, how do I start the conversation to make sure someone is doing okay mentally? Another one right here is like, what is the best way to allow others to open up if they are dealing with stress? And now a lot of times we want like the one size fits all answer to this. And it's usually not like one perfect solution. But I do really think the relatable factor is so important. And I really like stories. So as we talk about, in the Under Pressure Project, we talk about highs and lows and the skills to get through. But I love collecting people's stories of the highs. Sometimes we skip over that, like we just talk about the lows. But I want to know why, like why you love what you do. For example, one of my highs, my 14-year-old son, he was working the local farm here, and he came home from school one day incredibly sad. I don't know if you guys remember middle school, but it's like that time in life where your feet grow 2 sizes overnight and you have to be reintroduced every day to your feet. It's like, head, meet your feet, you know, and he says things like, have you tried the deodorant? But if you'll just remember middle school, what it was like, my son was having an incredibly difficult day. He came home and he just said, I'm tired. I'm frustrated with my friends. And he was committed to work on the farm with Jim that day. So he went out for 3 or 4 hours and he did the work. And he came back and he said, Mom, I feel better. He said, there is something about the work itself that is healing. So as we're talking about stress, we talk about the highs, like why do we do what we do? As I've been connecting with agriculture groups, you ask them the why, you get to their love, you get to their passion, and you pull from those highs, because that moment where we saw that the work healed and helped us, they'll see that in the industries too. So one group I was just working with, they said like, we get to create. Like he says, it's amazing. We create things that didn't exist before, day after day, and that fuels me and that excites me. So we explore those highs, but when we get to those lows, we want to give people skills and tools to get through those. I have about 7 things that I do at keynotes and breakout sessions to help get through those. But a lot of times it's helpful to know that stress, like sometimes it's about being where you are. I could pull out a whole bunch of other questions we have, but one thing that I'm thinking of is that, because I'm going to wrap up here in just a minute. But one of the things I'm thinking of is that when we're in stressful situations, a lot of times we're in the future or we're in the past. So when we're thinking about the future, we're anticipating, like we're thinking about all the things that can go wrong and we have no control. And when we're in the past, a lot of times we can feel helpless. So what we want to do is to help people be in that present moment, to be where you are. And sometimes we need to help our brain know that it's not currently in danger. So when we go through those natural disasters or those difficult things, and we continue to think about it, like our body can still think that we are currently in danger. And it starts to have all those responses. And so what we want to do is help people with their breath, help people to be where they are, help people with creativity to have skills to ride those waves. So another question that someone asked too is like, how can we make this feel safe or unashamed to talk about the lows? And one of the things we can do is tell our stories. Another thing we can do is invite people to ask our questions differently. So instead of saying like, how are you today? Give people a scale, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? So that they can put a number to it. Sometimes if we just ask things a different way. And I know you've been pulling up questions, but I would love to see if you guys want to continue this conversations. A lot of times we're listeners, but I want to ask you, because I have about 20 of these cards with questions on it, but this one comes up a lot. Just like, what are some ways we can talk about this safely? So I want to wrap up with that and invite you to share if there's anyone that wants to go off on mute to talk about how you create safety and creating conversations. If you have any other ideas you want to add.
All right, anybody who wants to contribute, go ahead and unmute, and I'm going to check out the chat here.
While you're doing that, I'm going to go back to screen share and just pull up my contact information as well. If I can support you in the good work that you are doing, I love to cheer people on. So again, I do work in the Under Pressure Project. We're helping people to pass through a breaking point. So many times we think we need to prevent that breaking point, but instead of trying so hard to like prevent all those negative things and the lows, what we want to try and do is to pass through that breaking point. So if I can ever help you with anything, you can reach me at KarenEddington.com, or my email is Karen@KarenEddington.com.
And does the Under Pressure Project have its own website, or is that like on your personal website?
Just on my personal website. I do have a second one and it has some other things, but my ag specific work will be right here.
Okay.
Chad, I see your hand up.
Hey, Karen, thank you for that information. That impact wave that you showed, was that your development, or was that is that available elsewhere?
I have seen a couple other people talk about it. Dr. Michael, he's the one that does the ag imperative theory. He has a couple of different things I've seen around, but I've also seen it in some different ways. So I've added some variations based on my research as well. But if you wanted to add another resource, Dr. Michael, is it Rossman?
Yeah.
Okay. He has some things as well you could research out and see more on as well. I love his work. I love how he talks about.
Fantastic.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, thanks.
Karen, Linda Emanuel here with AgriSafe. I'm the community health director, and we had a disaster in our little town of 1,200. I live on a farm as well with my father-in-law and two sons and husband. So yes, that curve that Chad had referred to, I've used that in some of my post-disaster conferences. I talk a lot about mental health. And I was there and I saw my community go through those highs and lows. And so some of the stories after the fact, when I was checking in with my community, we weren't in the flood, but a large part of the town that we go to church to, all these folks that we're friends with and network with were impacted. And what I kept hearing over and over again is when they would gather during the cleanup, they would gather nightly in their groups, and it would be the same people telling the same stories. And that was a lot of therapy for folks, but it's almost like you need a facilitator within those groups to help people understand that everybody needs their space and time to talk, even though it might be the same story they heard 2 nights ago. It's still important that they are still processing it. And everybody goes through a disaster like that differently. And some folks were well beyond it, and some were in that frozen mode. So it would be great. In my mind, I'm just thinking, how can we make this into a shared document that could have went out at that point of our flood, like 2-3 months later, when there were still people that were stuck, to educate them, as well as how to have those conversations with those folks.
I love what you're saying. I feel like a lot of times in order to move forward, like people need to be understood. And I don't even want to say move on. I like saying move forward, pass through that breaking point kind of thing. People tune out if they do not feel understood. And also we kind of keep talking. It happens a lot in our communication. Like if we don't feel heard, like we will spin out and swirl our stories over and over. And I don't know if there is a perfect solution or answer. I don't think one document being sent out to a community will educate people enough to help is to continue telling those stories. And I think it's the leadership training. For example, seeing that association ask people to apply, like, do you want to be leaders in your community? Getting a group of leaders, because it's the relatability, it's that peer-to-peer moment, getting some people who maybe have a little bit more training who can help guide those conversations, because those conversations can take difficult turns. You know, as you're talking about tragedies and difficult things, like there are some things that are out of our scope of practice to be talking about and dealing with. So I think the solution is in relatability and training leaders right here with people who understand.
Right, right. Are there projects out there that have that curriculum? The training of the leaders?
So one I know of, the Montana Stock Growers Association just started something called the MBAR Academy, and they're a really great one to look up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Karen, I know you have your information up there, but if you would go ahead and put your email address in the chat so people can just copy it, we'll do that. And we'll open it up. If you have any questions for any of our speakers, just go ahead and unmute. Otherwise, we will adjourn. And there are some messages in the chat. I know Lynette, I think a lot of them are for the Amish community in there too. All right. We will go ahead and send out the recording to this. I believe on YouTube it is set to private because we want just our members to be able to access it. So that will be sent out in the next couple of days by Quace. And that will also have all the speakers' contact information and what they spoke about today. So I want to thank all of our speakers and our members for coming again today. I enjoy each and every one of these. Because I think every one of them has something to offer, and like it was very unique. Each month is very unique. And if you have any suggestions, just go ahead and send them to me on topics or presenters that you would like to see in the future. All right, everyone. Thank you so much and have a great week.